During Prime Minister Narendra Modi's arrival in Sydney, along with his Australian counterpart Anthony Albanese, arrived at the Indian diaspora event to celebrate the country's dynamic, diverse Indian diaspora. As many as 20,000 members of the Indian diaspora attended the event and welcomed Prime Minister Modi. The anti-terrorism court in Islamabad granted bail to former Prime Minister Imran Khan in multiple cases after he was removed from power in 2022. More than 100 cases were filed against him. Earlier today, Khan and his wife were led into the court amid tight security. An ATC granted bail to Khan in at least 8 cases until the 8th of June. Following his arrival in Sydney for a 3-day visit, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi holds discussions with Australian business executives, meets prominent industrialists as well. The Indian Prime Minister also met Australian celebrity chefs, artists and singers. Modi and his Australian counterpart Anthony Albanese are scheduled to meet on Wednesday. A trade agreement was signed between the leaders of Iran and Indonesia. This comes after the official visit by Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi to expand economic relations. Indonesian President Joko Widodo said he hoped the agreement would increase trade between Indonesia and Iran. Raisi's visit comes as ties between the Islamic Republic and the West become increasingly strained. The Russian Interior Minister Vladimir Kolokoltsev, which is subject to sanctions throughout the West as a result of Moscow's conflict with Ukraine, visits Saudi Arabia and speaks with his counterpart. The visit comes days after the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky spoke at the Arab League summit in Jeddah. The two trips demonstrate how the Gulf Arab states, who have historically been US security clients, have kept their ties to Moscow strong despite the conflict in Ukraine. Many unions in Belgium staged a nationwide protest against poor working conditions and deterioration of their rights to strike. These protests are the latest in a string of demonstrations against a decision made by the country's supermarket chain Delhaize to transform its 128 stores across the country into franchises. Thousands of demonstrators took to the streets chanting slogans to protest against the irresponsible actions and to take necessary measures to protect workers from the impact of rising prices. The Israeli army destroyed the house of a Palestinian involved in an attack in Tel Aviv, who killed a man and wounded 3 others in March. Israeli security forces entered the Palestinian village of Nalin and demolished the family house of former Palestinian prisoner Muataz Khwaja. In a tactic adopted by Israeli army, they demolished the homes of attackers in an attempt to deter others. Prince Harry loses a legal bid to challenge the UK government's decision not to allow him to pay for police protection while in the UK. When Harry, Prince of Sussex, and his wife Meghan moved to the United States in 2020, they were stripped of the usual police protection that comes with being a royal. The decision to take him off the publicly funded protection was made by the Executive Committee for the Protection of Royalty and Public Figures. The training of Ukrainian pilots on F-16 fighter jets has begun in several countries, as stated by European Union representative Joseph Borrell. Netherlands Defense Minister was happy with the US green light to allow Ukrainian pilots to get training for flying F-16s. During last week's G7 summit in Hiroshima, US President Joe Biden announced that the US would join F-16 coalition. The US Services has detained a driver of a rented box truck which crashed into security barriers near the White House. According to sources, the investigators found a Nazi swastika flag that apparently came from inside the truck. After the crash, there was a major law enforcement and public safety response. As per the security services, nobody faced any injuries. Five unidentified assailants frightened two families in Victoria, a town in Chile, and set fire to two homes. According to sources, the unidentified individuals also set fire to a vehicle and a warehouse. However, the attack didn't result in any injuries to anyone. Before the upcoming UN Horn of Africa Pledging Conference, which will begin later this week, the UN is requesting funding of $7 billion. The International Rescue Committee and the UN claim that the appeal is vital to support populations in Kenya, Somalia and Ethiopia that are battling to survive. UN estimates over 21 million people living in the Horn of Africa are in desperate need of food assistance. A crane collapsed partially at a construction site in Atlanta, injuring 4 people. Emergency services rushed to the site and the injured people hurt were taken to the hospital. However, injuries sustained are not life-threatening. Nearby areas were blocked off and people were told to avoid the area. A fire broke out in a secondary school in Guyana, killing at least 20 people. So far, no cause has been ascertained for the mishap. Speculation is rife that the fire could have been started with malicious intent. No suspects have been identified so far. Guyana's President Irfan Ali called the major disaster horrible and painful. Apart from the fatal casualties, several people got injured in the fire at the Madhya Secondary School of Guyana. Lights of the iconic Redeemer statue landmark in Rio de Janeiro were switched off for an hour in solidarity for Real Madrid forward Vinicius Jr. The Brazilian government and the world of football united to condemn the racist acts that took place at the Spanish League match. Vinicius posted an image of Christ, the Redeemer, insisting more needs to be done to bring more light to racism's struggle. Brazil's racial Equality Minister has also expressed his support for the sportsperson. British unions are protesting against a bill requiring unionized professions to provide a minimum level of service during strikes in key public services. The new law requires a certain minimum level of services during walkouts by various workers, including the healthcare staff, firefighters and railway employees. The MPs are set to vote on the bill following months of disruptive stoppages across the private and public sectors. Decades-high inflation has fueled the worst cost of living crisis over a generation, leading to a series of strikes in UK with workers demanding hefty pay rises. UK's Interior Minister Suella Braverman has reacted to opposition charges on breaching the ministerial code. According to reports, Braverman asked government officials to help arrange a private driving awareness course to prevent her speeding violation. According to police and law enforcement, Braverman said she regretted the speeding offence and paid a fine. Polish defense minister said the country is in talks to buy Swedish early warning planes. The minister said negotiations will hopefully be finalized shortly. Poland has ramped up military spending since Russia's invasion of Ukraine last year. The government pledging to double the size of the army and spend 4% of GDP on defense in 2023. The Polish defense minister, after a meeting of defense ministers from Northern Europe, said the move will not only strengthen the resilience of Poland but also of NATO's eastern flank. South Korea has agreed to enhance security and supply chain cooperation with the European Union. This comes after President Yoon Suk-yeol's summit with EU leaders. Yoon held the summit with European Council President Charles Michel and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen in Seoul, a day after they participated in the G7 summit in Hiroshima. The European Council President said cooperation between the EU and South Korea was vital for the safety in the wake of Russia's continuous attacks on Ukraine. South Africa's electricity minister visited the QCell power station and with the management teams of Eskom, the public utility company. He said the team is having sleepless nights trying to find solutions in order to end load shedding plaguing the country. Turkish President Erdogan has secured the endorsement of an ultra-nationalist Sinan Ogan, whose third place finish helped force Turkey's first election runoff. Sinan Ogan's 5.2% of the vote in the May 14 general election in Turkey deprived Erdogan of an outright victory for the first time in his 20-year rule. Russian Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin arrived in China late on Monday night. He is scheduled to meet with President Xi Jinping and ink a series of deals on infrastructure and trade. He will take part in a Russian-Chinese business forum and visit a petrochemical research institute in Shanghai. As per the Kremlin, he will also talk with representatives of Russian business circles. China last year became the top energy customer for Russia. Russia's gas exports had otherwise plummeted after Western sanctions over the invasion of Ukraine. Strong winds from a rainstorm tore down the metal roof on a school's activity center in Thailand, killing 8 people, including 4 children, and injuring 18 others. Children and others had gone inside the activity center to shelter from the rain. The meteorological department issued a warning for heavy rain in Upper Thailand this week. Guam's governor urges residents to stay home and warned that the island could take a direct hit from Typhoon Mawar. The storm is strengthening on its path toward the US territory in the Pacific. The typhoon could be the biggest hit to Guam in 2 decades. Officials said it could cause extensive damage. Residents are preparing and emergency shelters are being opened.
This is looking at the radius of typhoon.
3 states have offered water cuts to aid the dwindling Colorado River. Arizona, Nevada and California have said that they are willing to cut back their use of Colorado River in exchange for money from its federal government and avoid forced cuts as drought threatens the key water supply for the US West. The plan is a potential breakthrough in a year-long stalemate and would conserve an additional 3 million acre-feet of water through 2026. About half of the cuts would come by the end of 2024, which reportedly is less than what's needed to stave off the river crisis, but is still a notable step in long and difficult negotiations between the 3 states. At the Cairns Airport in Australia's Queensland, a falling fireball was captured lighting up the night sky as it fell to earth. Surveillance camera footage from the airport showed the fireball, believed to be a meteor, illuminating night sky near an open-air car parking. A man and his sister, who were separated during the India-Pakistan partition 75 years ago, were reunited at the landmark Kartarpur Corridor. The Kartarpur Corridor is a visa-free border crossing and religious corridor between Gurdwaras in India's Punjab and Pakistan's Lahore. As per reports, 81-year-old Mahindra Kaur from India reunited with her 78-year-old brother Sheikh Abdul Aziz from Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Following the reunion, the Kartarpur administration adorned both families with garlands and distributed sweets. India's INS Tarini is set to return home after completing a 31,000-kilometer sailing expedition. Imagine expeditionary sailing at the high seas for 188 days from Goa on India's southwest coast to Cape Town, South Africa, and then Rio de Janeiro in Brazil and all the way back to India. Entirely powered by the wind sails of a simple boat, the crew of Indian naval sailing vessel Tarini is all set to return to India this afternoon, and a grand welcome awaits them at an Indian Navy facility in Goa. The International Day for Biological Diversity event 2023 was held in Kunming in southwest China's Yunnan province. The theme of this year's event was From Agreement to Action, Build Back Biodiversity. It commemorated China's chairmanship at the COP15 meeting in Montreal last December, during which it led countries to adopt the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. In a video address at the event, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said that the agreement on the framework marked an important step forward in global biodiversity conservation.